Everybody, welcome to session 12. We're going to be talking about 3D UI navigation interfaces and chair navigation. So I want to remind everybody to make sure you're posting questions on Slido. You're also welcome to gather in the chat channel. And if you are in Hubs, I'll try to gather in the first room there, just to be a little more social and interact. And don't forget that you can chat with each other in between the talks. So just to kick things off here, the first talk is going to be above surface interaction for multi-scale navigation in mobile virtual reality, presented by Tim Mesner.
So can I go?
Yep.
Okay, so hi everybody, and welcome to the presentation of our paper with the title Above Surface Interaction for Multi-Scale Navigation in Mobile Virtual Reality. This paper was written by me, that's Tim Mesner, and my colleagues Travis Gesslein and Jens Grubert. So let me start with the motivation for our work. New standalone mobile VR headsets like the Oculus Quest. What? Sorry. Okay, just forget about it. Okay, let's get back. First of all, I want to talk about the motivation for our work. New standalone mobile VR headsets like the Oculus Quest have enabled new mobile usage scenarios for virtual reality, but there's a problem with the interaction in those scenarios. Let me explain it to you with this short video clip here. Most of current virtual reality interaction relies on gesture input with controllers like this. I know this video may show a little bit of an extreme case, but I think you're getting the point I'm trying to make. You need a lot of space for it to be safe for you and for others. So, and in comparison, this is how a mobile, sorry, something isn't really working here. Okay, in comparison, this is how a mobile space often looks like, for example, in public transportation or a plane, like in this case. You can see March has hardly enough space to hold a newspaper, and no way enough space to perform all those crazy movements like the guy in the video we just watched. So this is a problem, but to every problem, there's a solution. And in this context, our idea was to use the given space in a mobile scenario more efficiently by combining a common mobile input device like a smartphone with finger tracking in the space above the device. And this idea is also supported by the recent enabling of hand tracking on the Oculus Quest. So, but before talking about our approach, I want to present some related research work in the field of spatial interaction. A survey on the topic was, for example, published by Brody et al. Last year, and work from Grubert et al. Focused on multi-fidelity interaction with displays around the body. Furthermore, some design guidelines for the interaction with maps in virtual reality were given by Giannopoulos et al. And recently, Satriadi et al. Explored hand and foot gestures for map navigation within augmented reality in tabletop settings. Our work relates as we are also using above surface interaction, but we are more focused on the interaction in environments with limited space, as already mentioned. So also relevant for our work is multi-scale navigation, as this is a task we want to focus on primarily. In this field, the use of around device interaction to navigate through such a virtual environment of changing size was investigated by Jones et al. Kratz et al. Dealt with semi-automatic zooming techniques for navigating maps on mobile devices. Furthermore, Spindler et al. Compared pinch to zoom and drag to pan with mid-air spatial navigation, utilizing absolute mappings and found that navigating a large information space by moving the display devices outperforms navigation with 2D surface gestures. And last but not least, Howard et al. Compared 2D surface gestures with spatial navigation. Next on, I want to talk a bit more about our motivation for using finger tracking in the described scenario. Above surface interaction with a finger is an efficient way to use the available input space in a mobile scenario without additional hardware. As you can see, if you're only using touch, you only have 2 dimensions, which is limiting the space for input you have. While when you're using 3 dimensions with spatial interaction, you have much more space to perform input. So what are we trying to find out? If the combination of a small common touch input device with spatial input and the space above it is really an alternative in this scenario. And how are we going to find it out? By conducting a study. So as the next step, I want to describe our implemented technique for moving over the map. First of all, you also have a problem here. If you have a small input space, like described before, and you have a large output space, and you're using absolute mapping, this will result in a very low control display ratio, which means low precision. So in this case, a relative position-based mapping is better suited. So this is how our solution works. The position of the finger hovering over the display relative to the middle point of the display determines speed and direction of the movement over the map. So for example, when you're holding your finger in the upper right corner of the screen or about the screen, you're moving with maximum speed in this direction. Quite similar, I want to show you our zoom technique. As already mentioned on the last slide in our scenario, absolute mapping would lead to low precision. So we decided again to go for a relative one. But for comparison, we also implemented an absolute technique. You can see our paper for details if you're interested. Like with the movement, here the zoom speed and direction are determined by the finger height. Also shown in the video here and on the figure here. If the user is holding the finger at maximum height, he's zooming out with maximum speed. If his finger is directly in the touchscreen, he's zooming in with maximum speed. And if his finger is in the middle point between those 2 points, he wouldn't zoom in any direction. So what were we trying to find out with our study? Our research question is, can above surface interaction outperform traditional touch input for navigating large information spaces in virtual reality? And here's a quick overview of the design of our study. You can see how each condition looks like in the videos below, and with the following independent variables. Interface, which was our use control technique. We had 3D navigation as described before, and baseline, which were touch controls. We also featured 2 map sizes, a small map and a large map. The 2 map sizes were based on a pilot study we conducted, where we tested the 2 control options in different map sizes. And within each condition, there were 3 distances between markers. The distances were relative to the map diagonal. We had a small distance, which was 12.5%, a medium distance, which was 25%, and a large distance, which was 50%. And we measured the following dependent variables. Somehow they are not appearing, right? Should. Okay, I guess my PowerPoint is having problems again. Okay. Aye. One time you need PowerPoint and then it's doing this crazy stuff. When I go back, I guess I have to restart PowerPoint. Sorry, but this is doing crazy stuff. Restart PowerPoint quick. So sorry for the delay, but it should work now, I hope. So we measured the following dependent variables: the target acquisition time, then the errors made by the user, also the workload. We used a NASA TLX for this. We measured also usability with a system usability questionnaire. And we also measured simulator signals with a SSQ. And we also had an additional questionnaire for subjective preference of the user. Oh, it isn't shared. Oops, sorry. It. Here it is. So sorry again. Can you see it now? Okay, then let's just continue. Okay, the task itself presented as following to the user. We had 15 targets, 5 for each distance category. The targets appeared in a randomized order. The current target was highlighted in blue, and the other target was red. User had to navigate to the target, then he had to zoom in at maximum level, and then he could click the target. And who were our participants? We had 20 volunteers, 7 were female, 13 were male. The participants had a mean age of 24.4 with a standard deviation of 3. 15 of our participants had VR experience before. 17 participants had gaming experience before, and 5 of the participants wore glasses or contact lenses. 19 were right, 1 was left-handed, and 15 zoomed with their thumb and the index finger, and 5 used the combination of the index and middle finger for zooming. So next on, the procedure and apparatus. The experiment consisted of 5 parts for each participant. First of all, we gave a quick introduction with the first demographic questionnaire and a short tutorial for our control techniques. Then we entered the first actual condition, consisting of a short training phase and the main condition afterwards. Each condition was followed by the questionnaires I mentioned 2 slides ago. And at the end, we also had a short debriefing with the possibility to provide feedback. As you can see, the whole experiment lasted 16 minutes on average. And we blocked our conditions by map size and counterbalanced the 2 blocks in order to rule out a potential influence of order on the results. The interaction techniques in the test environment were implemented with Unity. Like I mentioned before, as baseline, we used touch controls. And these touch controls were designed to mimic Google Maps as close as possible. We used a PC with the following specs for running the test environment. And we used the Amazon Fire Phone with the following touchscreen size for running the touch application. For our VR, we used the HTC Vive Pro headset. And for tracking, we used 8 OptiTrack Prime 13 cameras, and 3 of those cameras were near-field cameras, which have a wider field of view, which makes them better for tracking in the near range. For our data analysis, we used RMANOVA when data fitted normal distribution or could be transformed to do so. When this was not possible, and for subjective data, we used an aligned rank transformation first. For multiple comparisons, we used Holm-Bonferroni adjustments with an initial significance level of 0.05. And now to results. Most importantly, participants acquire targets significantly faster with 3D navigation compared to baseline. Also, 3D navigation resulted in significantly higher SUS scores, significantly lower workload ratings, was preferred by more participants. Here is a short figure showing more detailed results for the target acquisition times. The boxes encompass the interquartile range. The whiskers extend to 1.5 times the interquartile range, respectively the minimum and maximum data points, if those do not exceed the interquartile range. And the solid vertical lines indicate the median. Similar results were obtained when excluding one participant whose target acquisition times were substantially larger than the times of the other participants, which is depicted as outlier in the figure. And the results are omitted for brevity. The same is true for this figure showing the error rate. As you can see here, no significant differences could be detected regarding the error rate. Regarding workload, we found a significant main effect for interface. Also, 3D navigation scored significantly lower regarding temporal demand, effort, frustration, the overall demand, and had a significantly better performance. We also found a significant main effect for map size. The small map size has a significantly lower overall demand as we expected. So next on the system usability scale. All conditions but baseline large map resulted in above average SUS ratings, which means above 68. Only baseline large map resulted in a rating of 66. We also found a significant main effect for interface. And overall, 2D navigation has a significantly higher usability rating than baseline. Now a quick overview of the results of the preference questionnaire and some general observations. 15 participants preferred 3D navigation over baseline on the small map, and all 20 did so on the large map. 8 participants had the impression of 3D navigation being faster. 1 participant mentioned losing feeling for zoom range on single-colored map parts with 3D navigation. 3 participants said that baseline was better on the small map, as they were already used to it. 2 participants stated that baseline was too slow for navigating on the large map, as well as too unprecise. On the small map in 70 instances for baseline and respectively 30 instances for re-navigation, participants found and clicked the target without zooming at all, which was never the case on the large map. These different zooming strategies are also supported by the following graphic, which shows the finger height of a selected user who achieved average target acquisition times during the 3D condition on both map sizes. As you can remember, zooming was done by lifting the finger. So higher finger height indicates in general an increased usage of zooming. So it becomes visible that the user zoomed much more on the large map, which is shown in purple, than on the small map, which is shown in blue. This can be attributed to the circumstance that on the smaller map, a larger part of the map is already visible inside of the field of view of the user before he needs to zoom. So summarized, what does this all mean? Well, it means that above surface interaction performs better than touch regarding target acquisition times, stability, workload, and that it is also preferred by users. This difference is even greater on the large map, and different zooming strategies can be an explanation for this. But our study cannot be generalized for all mobile use cases, as we only investigated one. The phone was lying on the table during the whole experiment. Also, further form factors like further information space sizes could be explored. Another limitation was the usage of a high-quality external tracking system in our study. This is not really a mobile solution, so it may be worth taking a look how other solutions perform. In this context, you can look at how do commodity camera-based systems perform. We also have a poster for this at this year conference. It is called Accuracy of Commodity Finger Tracking Systems with Virtual Reality Head-Mounted Displays by Daniel Schneider et al. So recalling our initial research question, is above surface interaction as an alternative interaction method for small spaces a good idea? Well, based on our findings, I guess we can say yes. But other usage scenarios like standing or walking also need to be explored further. Also, the rich interaction space that opens up when combining traditional compute devices, such as smartphones, tablets, and notebooks, with VR headsets capable of spatial tracking is also worth taking a closer look in general. So thank you for your attention. I hope the PowerPoint problems didn't distract too much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
All right, thank you, Tim. So we do have a couple questions here in Slido.
Great.
The first one is, how long did it take people to learn and be comfortable using this interface? And do you have any insights about the user experience? And how about long-term usage? Seems like it might be tiring.
Well, most people, they learned relatively quick to use this interface. Most people only needed 1 or 2 minutes in training. Then they felt comfortable to use this. So what was the next question?
Talking about long-term usage. So are people getting tired from using their hands for a long time?
Well, in our scenario, like I mentioned, the phone was lying on a table. So people had the possibility to support their arm on the table. In this scenario, they didn't get tired. But I can imagine that if you use it in another scenario, like standing or walking or without a table, then I think users may get tired.
Okay. And then we have one other question. Were the touch surface and the finger position visualized for the user so they could kind of see where their hand position was in 3D space?
Yes, they could see their finger positions. We had both fingers tracked in the touch condition, so they could see inside the virtual environment where the fingers were. We had 2 circles indicating the position, different colors.
All right, thank you, Tim. I think we're about out of time for questions. So we're going to move on to our second talk here. The next talk is Real Walking in Place, Hex-Core Prototype Omnidirectional Treadmill, and it's presented by Xiao Wang, who I don't believe is here live, so we're going to be watching a pre-recorded video of his, and unfortunately we won't be able to do question and answer afterwards. Oh, no, I am seeing Xiao Wang here in the chat. Xiao, are you here? All right, so our next talk again is a pre-recorded video, Real Walking in Place, the Hexacore Prototype Omnidirectional Treadmill, presented by Xiao Wang.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xiao Wang from Southeast University. My subject is Real Walking in Place, Hexacore Prototype Omnidirectional Treadmill. Let's look around. We are now in Mozilla House. We could notice that we have hands, we have body, but unfortunately we don't have legs. If we want to move in house, what should we do? As the GitHub shows, if you are using the keyboard, you could use WASD to move, and the right mouse button to teleport. If you are using the Vive or Oculus, you use the controller to move and the trigger to teleport. Here is an example of teleport. However, if you want to have a more immersive experience, it is better to use your own legs to move. That is a locomotion problem in VR. There are two main type methods to solve this problem. The first is the simulation type, another is the real working type. In the simulation type, the first is using button or joystick. This is a very simple method, but it will lead to a strong motion sickness. The second is flash or teleportation, also as we are using now. If you use method continuously, it is easy for you to find that you will lose your direction. The third is arm swing or step in place. This method has a low degree of freedom and it looks weird. For the real working type, the first is also the most popular way is working in large space. This method needs a large space and only could provide a limited space to exploration. Actually, you could only move in a fixed space. The second is the redirected working. This is a very popular research object recent years. This method also needs a large space. The minimum demand for space is about 7 meters in radius. If you don't care the huge device, the omnidirectional treadmill is the best way to solve this problem. It only requires less than 2 square meters and could provide a very natural working experience. In the omnidirectional treadmill field, there are several design schemes. As shown in the red pictures, a lot of commercial products, such as the KitWork, the Virtuox Omni, Starbreeze Virtualizer, or Vue, are the low-friction surface-based ODTs. They have the same basic principles. The users stand on a low-friction surface, and their wrists are tied to the machine. More precisely, users are sliding on the surface. A lot of drive surface-based ODTs based on different principles. The streeter will eliminate the rotation of humans, but it is hard to move sideways. The Omni deck could provide the contracted velocity field, so the user's feet are not parallel during movement. The Infinite deck is a perfect one. It uses two vertical belts to construct an omnidirectional velocity field, and has a full degree of freedom. The only one shortage is its huge volume. It has 225 kilograms and 40 centimeters thick. We believe that the room scale VR in the future needs a lighter and thinner ODT with a full degree of freedom, and that is our motivation. So we designed the HexScore prototype. It is a drive surface-based ODT and has a full degree of freedom. It could provide an omnidirectional velocity field. The most important, it is only 16 centimeters thick and 150 kilogram weight. The red picture shows the flow chart of our system. First, the positioning system will calculate the off-center distance of the users. The control system will control the servo motors to generate a velocity field with a certain direction and amplitude. Users in the velocity field will be sent back to the center. The output information of our system is the user's moving distance. It could be calculated by the control system based on the off-center distance and the current speed. We apply a traditional control strategy, that is a PID controller in the control system. The motor system contains two identical servo motors. The main contribution of our system are the omnidirectional velocity field scheme and the positioning system. So we will demonstrate these two parts in detail. Let's take a look how to generate the omnidirectional velocity field. The left image demonstrates the core components of our scheme. There are two mirror chains. Each chain contains a support gear, a drive gear, and a number of rollers that are inclined at 45 degrees. When the system is running, chain 1 and chain 2 can be driven by servo motors, respectively, through the drive gear. For example, the chain 1 has the velocity of Vc1 as the blue solid line shows. The chain 2 has the velocity of Vc2 as the red solid line shows. Due to the rotation of the rollers, only the velocity along the roller's axial direction is preserved. As the blue and red dashed line shows, based on this structure, the originally two parallel velocities are decomposed into two vertical velocities, that is the V1 and V2. After arranging the two kinds of chains alternately, V1 and V2 are alternately distributed on the surface. Then we could get the synthesized velocity V star. The positioning system is an IMU-based system, as shown in the left part image. The user stands on the omnidirectional velocity field and is tied by the belt. There are 4 rotation points. Each rotation point has a specific rotation axis. The length of the retractable rod can change. The 4 rotation points and the retractable rod jointly provide 6 degrees of freedom for the user. As the red part shows, no matter where the user is standing on and which direction facing for, the line from the center of the user's body to point 1 that is a red dashed line, is always parallel to the retractable rod. Therefore, the position of the user can be calculated by measuring the spatial attitude of the retractable rod using the IMU. Here is an overview of our system. The left picture shows our system compared with the Infinitec. It is apparently our system is much thinner than Infinitec. The right is our system demo. Let's see how it works. As we can see, there are a lot of things to improve. The most important should be the control system. Currently, we only applied the simple PID controller. If we want a higher speed, a more immersive and safe experience, we should build a robust controller. Now, we are considering introducing the motion prediction to the controller to achieve this goal. Besides, we need to improve the mechanism.
All right, thank you.
We are building Haskell
so our author was able to
MK1
us a
that is
bit
a much
late, so we
thinner
can't take
treadmill,
questions.
which only
if
has
anybody
less
them
than
here.
8 centimeters
There are a
thick
couple, looks like they're
and
showing
could
up on
provide
Slido.
a high speed
Not yet.
up to 9 kilometers
right.
per hour.
We're
Hello?
working on it.
The last is cooperation.
Can you hear me?
Building the future together, please contact me. My
Ooh,
email
yeah, thank you.
and my WeChat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So are we live with the Q&A at this point? All right, thank you, Zia. So our author was able to join us a little bit late. We're glad to have him here. So looks like we have a couple questions in Slido. So the first one is there, or it seems like the treadmill brings back people after they step forward, which
I'm
might
sorry.
result in
I
some
kinda-
visual vestibular cue conflicts, which tend to study.
Sorry, the
Can you hear
signal
me?
is not very well. So I can't hear you just now. Can you
So the question is about motion sickness and
Motion
visual
sickness.
vestibular cue conflicts.
most what?
Cue conflicts between visual and vestibular motion.
I train my brain by people after. which might result in. Please wait a moment. No, I haven't assessed motion sickness. But actually, when I using my treadmill, I think that's just like natural walking. Um, I think it don't have sickness, motion sickness.
Okay, thank you. The other question we have is about body tracking. So is there an opportunity to integrate body tracking into your system to further improve its performance?
Yes. I think. Yes, yes. We are thinking introducing the body tracking in our system to speed up the treadmill. I think that's a big problem, and that's a challenge.
Okay, thank you. And then have you thought about things you might do in the future to support locomotion over non-planar surfaces? So walking on hills, for example, or stairs.
Yes, I have idea to since our treadmill is thinner than the best one, such as the Infinite Deck, I think our treadmill is much easy to tune. Such as we can add servo motors to control the rotation of the treadmill. We can provide angle under the surface, under the treadmill. Can you hear me?
All right. Thank you, Xiao. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. So we're going to take a short break while we set up the next talk. And just a reminder for those of you in Hubs, don't forget to socialize a little bit and talk to each other. Okay, back in a minute. All right, welcome back. So our next talk is going to be VR bridges, simulating smooth, uneven surfaces in VR. And the talk's presented by Kristina Vasilevska, and she's going to present it in a pre-recorded video, and then she'll take questions live at the end. So don't forget to post them in Slido. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kristina Vasilevska and I'm presenting a paper, VR bridges simulating smooth uneven surfaces in VR. Real world is full of surfaces and many of them are smooth and uneven. At the same time, virtual reality is kind of flat. So how do we simulate such surfaces? What stimuli can we implement for VR to achieve our desired illusion of certain height and slant? Real-world research showed that, in general, people overestimate heights and geographical slant. However, the final results of such estimation might be influenced by a variety of factors. For example, estimation of height depends on the viewing perspective. If you are judging it looking up from below or looking down from above, the result will be different. And also, a regular hill might feel like a steep mountain to you if you have a heavy backpack or are fatigued. Similar outcomes would be observed for emotions, sensations, and many other factors as well. Examples of the realistic non-flat virtual reality experience typically rely on discrete approaches, such as simulating the stairs. That could be done with robotics, like in Game Master Project, or passive haptics, like these tilted planks in the Infinite Stairwell project. Or with the active haptics for simulating the elevator with a vibrating platform, like we did a couple of years ago. Of course, there are other examples. Another approach to tackle the unevenness in VR is with software manipulation. Marshall et al. Used camera manipulations to create the illusion of and impression of holes and bumps without visual indication of such, while the user was walking on the flat floor. They manipulated the height of the camera, the pitch of the camera, and movement velocity. Inspired by the previous research, we made our own assumptions. We prioritized visuals and seamless experience to provide the correct visual cues for the illusion that we aimed for. We also decided to try not to try only the flat physical surface, but also a convex real surface, assuming that the latter would make a positive difference. Pitch manipulation also seemed to be promising to contribute to the desired slant perception. And finally, vibrotictile stimulation that lightly shakes the whole body was assumed to be able to support the visual illusion as well, by altering the proprioceptive and vestibular cues. For the setup of our first user study, we used a flat bridge that you can see on the video. It was 3.5 meters long and 55 centimeters wide, with an audio transducer mounted to it. The participants were wearing wireless Vive Pro with 2 handheld controllers and additional tracker on the tailbone. It was used for more stable camera height adjustment. The experiment was conducted in the tracked space size 10 by 6 meters and covered with 4 base stations. We also used a powerful PC for rendering with a 2080 Ti video card. We chose the following variables for our study. The added visual height of the virtual bridges ranged from -40 to +40 with a 20 centimeters interval. For the seamless experience, we always adjusted the camera height according to the virtual bridge. Another variable was pitch manipulation that was dependent on the virtual bridge shape. And of course, there was a uniform vibrotictile stimulation. We chose the within subjects design, and the combinations of variables resulted in 16 conditions, which were presented in a randomized counterbalance sequence. Finally, they were followed by a ground truth in the very end, which turned out to be a complete giveaway of our manipulations, so we did not include it in this statistical analysis. To map all these virtual bridges to a single physical prop, we used Redirected Walking Toolkit by MXR Lab and masked it with a Pop the Balloon game. To assure that our virtual and real bridges are aligned perfectly and to minimize the redirection time to achieve this goal, we extended the redirection with a combination of change blindness and optical flow. By doing additional redirection when the pop balloon exploded with the colorful particles distracting the user. The procedure of the first user study was as follows. The participants read and signed the informed consent, filled the Kennedy Cybersickness questionnaire, and answered some general questions. They received instruction, and only after they were equipped and blinded with the HMD, they were led to the lab. They were completely naive to the real arrangement within the lab. In the lab, they practiced first in VR to perform the task we gave them, and when they were ready, they proceeded with the experiment. After they are done with the experiment, they were led outside of the lab and finished with the Kennedy Cybersickness questionnaire and answered the questions about the strategies they used for doing the estimations and the number of real and virtual bridges that they noticed. We asked the participants during the task performance to estimate the height of the virtual bridges twice, once numerically in the center of the bridge and once visually after the bridge using the 1-to-1 scale slider. For the slant estimation, we implemented a tilting instrument similar to one that used in the real-world studies. It was used to tilt the surface to recreate the maximum experience slant. Additionally, we asked the participants to evaluate subjective experience of each bridge. To address cybersickness, we asked, how do you feel after the bridge? For preference, how did you like the bridge? And for naturalness, how natural was the movement on the bridge? 22 participants, 10 female and 12 male, aged from 21 to 64 years old, took part in the study. As you can see on the graph, there was a massive underestimation of the visually suggested heights. Although the added visual height had a significant main effect and participants were able to discriminate between the different height levels, only about a part of the added visual height made it to the estimations. For the other variables, the trend for the estimations improved somewhat for the conditions with vibratactile stimulation and cases of large negative and positive added visual height, but it didn't have a statistically significant effect. For the slant estimation, we observed a similar outcome. Overall underestimation, with a main effect of the added visual height and significant contrast between the levels of it, but no systematical effect of other manipulations. An interesting improvement of both pitch and vibratactile stimuli, as well as their combination, was observed for the cases with the plus 40 centimeters added visual height. Our participants reported of noticing on average 7 different virtual bridges and 2 to 3 real bridges. That might mean that 20 centimeters interval of the added visual height was too small to differentiate between the smaller manipulations, or that the sensation of the flat bridge was overruling the illusion at some point. In our second study, we used a convex bridge with the same length and width, but smoothly elevated up to 30 centimeters off the floor in its middle. In the study, we did not have a concave hanging bridges as in the previous one, but still had conditions with the virtual bridges which were lower than the physical prop. We followed the same procedure and had the same tasks, adjusting the reporting scale to match the visual height levels. The added visual height variable in the second study ranged from -20 to +40 centimeters with the same 20 centimeter interval. This time we included the ground truth in the analysis. Camera pitch manipulation and vibrotactile stimulation were applied similarly to study 1. All of that resulted in 16 conditions overall that were presented in a randomized counterbalanced order. 21 participants, 11 female and 10 male, aged from 23 to 63 years old, participated in the second study. Similar to study 1, the added visual height had significant main effect and contrast, but there was no systematic effect of other variables. If you look at the graph, the negative and zero added visual height resulted in very similar overestimation in all conditions, suggesting that the field of physical prop was overruling in case of negative added visual height. To our surprise, the median estimations were correct for the case of +20 centimeters, even with visuals only. There was also a slight overestimation for the condition with vibration and pitch combination manipulation. And indeed, a similar result was achieved for the +40 added visual height with a combination of vibration and pitch manipulation, where there was also a similar performance in the condition with vibration only. At the same time, the condition with pitch-only manipulation did not perform much better than the visuals-only condition. For the slant, we had similar results with overestimation for the first two added visual height levels and the underestimation for the rest. In the underestimated cases, the combination of vibrotactile and pitch also showed to be improving the estimates, but seldomly they reached the desired levels. Interestingly, that in these cases, it is the vibrotactile conditions that performed more similar to the visuals-only condition. Our participants reported that they have experienced, on average, 5 virtual bridges, while we had only 4. It's 2 less than in study 1, but still more than we really had. For the real bridges, they reported an average 4 bridges, which is more than in study 1, and suggests that this time we succeeded to create a more plausible illusion and mask the properties of the real prop itself. To conclude, the use of the passive haptics with the shape similar to the simulated surface is definitely beneficial. Pitch manipulation might improve the slant perception in VR, but at the cost of preferences, naturalness, and also possible cyber sickness. In both studies, we did all we could think of to introduce this manipulation as seamlessly as possible. We also did not limit our participants in freedom to look around and prevented the possible visual artifacts. Moreover, we applied only half of the angle that was suggested by the derivative. We assumed that this manipulation might require further research to find a better way to apply it. Talking about the vibrotactile stimulation, it seems to be more efficient for the height manipulations larger than 20 centimeters. It does improve the height estimates, but not the slant. However, it might mask some of the drawbacks of other manipulation, such as feeling of unnaturalness caused by the pitch manipulation. Finally, the use of negative added height seems to be less efficient than the positive one. But that might change if we use the concave real props, which is the subject of future research. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Christina. So we do have a couple questions here. The first is, have you considered assessing the just noticeable difference to assess how much the visual has to be altered to cause a change in perception?
Well, not in this work, because this is like one of the first attempts to do something like this, as far as I'm aware of. But in principle, yes, in the further work, if my student is up to continuing in this direction, we definitely can try something like that. And I think we actually need it. But on my experience, I can tell that 20 centimeters is barely noticeable. So I would go for 30 next time, maybe. Thank you.
All right. Next question. Have you considered features on the floor which improve depth estimation, things like stripes with varying width, etc.?
On the floor, on the virtual floor, we, as you could see on the video, we had like a texture, which did have some texture on it. It's not like completely plain green, and we also had some depth to the difference between the islands that the bridge is connected and the water underneath it. So, but we also explicitly told people how to judge the height of the bridges. And for the cases of flat bridge, we also had the completely flat bridge, which was a copy of the real one. And as a control, it did show that our explanations connected, there were no misunderstandings, and the reference points were all correct. So it was always between the start of the bridge and the top point of the bridge, what we asked participants to estimate regarding the bridge height.
All right, thank you. So the next question is about self-avatars, and do you think the results would have changed if people had an avatar?
Maybe, but you know, for the right perception of height and everything else that is where you can use the body parameters for reference, you have to really precisely fit the avatar to match the person's parameters. So it's not that easy, I would say. But for example, in our case, our users had the reference point of their Vive controllers. They saw them in real world and they looked exactly the same and were scaled exactly the same in VR. And we also made a point of actually they could use the movement of the controllers to see the virtual height and to evaluate, so they could really move the controller over the rails. It was right always, which took a lot of time to implement actually. But yeah, they did have some reference. It was not just the visuals that we did.
All right, thank you. The next question is about teleportation. Do you think teleportation could be incorporated into the system, and teleportation especially over uneven ground?
Well, you can do teleportation over uneven ground even now, I think. If you just provide the right surface for collision when you're doing the raycast. But the problem of the teleportation is this missing connection between 2 points, which you just blink from one point to another, and then you don't have the sense of the surface. Actually, you just have the viewing perspective change. So I don't think that let's say the perceptual outcome will be the same.
Okay, and then I think we have time for just one more quick question. So you mentioned cyber sickness. Any idea what the main cause might have been?
I personally am very sensitive to the pitch manipulation, as it turned out. I immediately picked up every time when my student was running the test runs on me. I always could tell, oh, this one has pitch manipulation. It did not happen to other colleagues of mine, so I do not know really who is susceptible to this and who is not. But I think there should be maybe less manipulation, or it should be applied on with a nonlinear function or something like this, or also maybe also consider the dynamics of the head position change in height when you're making the steps. Could be this is my guess is as good as yours. I don't I'm not 100% sure.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Christina. So we're going to go to break real quick here, and then we'll set up the next talk and be back. All right, welcome back. Our next talk is Take a Look Around, the impact of decoupling gaze and travel direction in seated and ground-based virtual reality, utilizing torso-directed steering. And this will be presented by Daniel Zelasco. Same format as last time, we'll have a pre-recorded video, and then Daniel will be available live to answer all of your questions at the end.
Everybody. My name is Daniel Zelasco, and together with my colleagues Yuan Law and Benjamin Byers, I had a look on the impact of decoupling gaze and travel direction in seated and ground-based virtual reality utilizing torso-directed steering. Travel, or better steering methods in VR, are often gaze or head-directed when an HMD is used. And while being different to reality, it actually works quite well. One reason might be that in first-person video games it has always worked like that, because there is technically no difference between the head and the body. Now, as we already mentioned, that's different in reality, and we actively make use of body-directed travel. We also know this in VR, and it's called torso-directed steering. In this family of steering method, the torso or hips are somehow tracked and the virtual movement happens in the forward direction of it, independently from the viewing direction. So the question is, why is torso-directed steering used less often than other techniques while being obviously more realistic? As usual, it will have something to do with the cost-benefit ratio, and we will talk about the costs later. First, we try to answer if there are actually benefits, for instance on performance, presence or cyber sickness, and if there are, how do they look? When asking the literature, there is work from Bowman, Zoomer and von Capri tackling this question, but their research focus usually was another, and thus they found mixed results. So let's see if we can bring some light into the darkness. We concentrated on ground-based scenarios, and you might agree that controlling more than 1 degree of rotational freedom with your torso is a whole nother story and maybe also not arguably natural anymore. For our initial evaluation, we also restricted the scenario to the user being seated on a swivel chair. We just had to start with sitting or standing and decided for going seated first. As a side note, reasons pro and contra seated VR were just discussed last weekend in our workshop. You might want to have a glance on it. Let's have a look on the conditions we evaluated. Going from classic video gaming, where the travel platform usually is the same as the camera platform, one possible transformation to VR is to keep it the same, and we get gaze-directed steering. However, we also have the possibility to include a virtual body that rotates independently from the head, maybe because we actually want to display a consistent virtual body in VR. This virtual body could also be a vehicle, such as an office desk. In this work, however, we used a neutral green arrow above the subject's head. So this in sum leads to the following conditions we tested: gaze-directed, torso-directed, and let's call it virtual body or pointer-directed steering, where the last two allow for freely looking around independently from the direction of travel and the first does not. So that's about the direction. But additionally, we also expected that the motor component of the travel technique also has an impact on the question if the ability of looking around is beneficial or not. We especially expected a difference between already embodied interfaces, here leaning, and joystick or controller-based interfaces. Therefore, we crossed all conditions with this second factor. So here's a shortened list of things we expected to show up. First, we expected that the ability to look around leads to more efficiency when it is a relative motion task. This would show up in torso and pointer-directed steering. Second, we expected that moving around with your own physical body, this means torso-directed, generates more environmental awareness than gaze-directed at the other end. Third, we expected that with the number of body cues, also the level of spatial awareness increases, which leads to torso-directed leaning should work the best. Fourth, we expected torso-directed leaning having also the highest hedonic quality, which just means it feels the best. Here's the within subject study design. We put 25 subjects into 6 different randomly generated Roman non-branching temple mazes, which they had to travel along and at the end had to answer where they started. On their way through the streets, they had to collect coins in the alleys, which was rated to be their highest priority task. But let's just look on some moving pictures. First, we can see the training level, where the participants had the opportunity to train every method as long as they wanted before starting an actual run. Here you can watch a user collecting a coin by looking at it. In the first set of methods, the actual travel speed is given by a joystick, and the direction of travel in this first case by the user's gaze or head direction. In the second of 3 methods in the first set, the travel direction instead is given by the user's torso. Last, the direction is given by a virtual pointer or body in form of a green arrow. The orientation of the arrow is manipulated with the gamepad. In the second set of methods, the travel speed is given by the degree of leaning of the user's upper body. In this first method, the direction is again given by the head direction. In the second, it's again the user's torso determining the direction of travel. And last but not least, it is the green arrow again, which now is turned by looking into the intended direction. Let's come to the results and start with the task performance, where we measured completion time on the left and traveled distance on the right. On the x-axis, there are the different pairs of conditions listed, and the y-axis gives us the numbers in seconds or in meters. The white and dotted part of the bars show something close to a perfect run, where we ran with maximum speed from the start to the end without collecting any coins to give you a relation. Therefore, the first thing we notice is that the impact on the time was much higher than on the distance traveled, indicating that people ran slower or stopped to collect the coins. Fun fact, there was actually one participant who almost made it in perfect time through the mazes, showing that it was theoretically possible to collect all the coins without reducing speed when using a decoupled method. Another side note is that surprisingly the subjects listened to us and only 0.14% of the coins were missed. Thus we can ignore errors in our evaluation. So we expected the torso and pointer directed methods to work the best. And that worked out. You should shout no! And you are right, there is one exception. Pointer directed leaning. And actually we also expected this to happen, but left it out here. The reason for this in short is, and you find more details on this in the paper, that the orientation of the virtual pointer or body in this method was also controlled by looking around, and this massively interacted with the ability to look around. However, especially this combination of methods worked out for us in the past and other scenarios, and thus we tested it, expecting that it will fail in this scenario, and this will show up in more results. So, excluding this method, we were able to confirm our initial hypothesis. Please look up the exact numbers and significancy levels in the paper. Second, we had a look on the environmental awareness, and we measured it by counting the collisions with the environment, where the y-axis in this case gives the mean total numbers of collisions per condition. Here we almost exactly found what we expected. That means torso-directed provoked the least amount of collisions and gaze-directed the most. Next, we had a look at the spatial orientation, and listed here is the absolute orientation error in degree the participants made. And between the conditions we found no difference. However, we still think that there is a difference, or more precise, a benefit in more embodied interfaces, as also reported in related work. But we noticed that the task may have been too difficult and people were forced to guess when they had no idea, which may have faded away possible effects. So we got some feelings, but the variance was just too high. Last but not least, we had a look at the user experience in form of a user experience questionnaire, or more precise, its short form. The figure shows from left to right the pragmatic quality dotted, the hedonic quality striped, and the overall score of the questionnaire for all pairs of conditions. Not surprising, the participants rated the gamepad conditions with the highest pragmatic quality, but torso-directed leaning played in the same class. Additionally, torso-directed leaning was also rated with the highest hedonic quality, confirming our last hypothesis, resulting also in some in the highest user experience. One interesting observation we made in interviews after the study that matches here was that people actually felt the pointer-directed gamepad method to be much closer to the feeling of a first-person video game than the gaze-directed, which surprised us, but shows also in its hedonic quality. It was not very exciting to use this already known method. So let's finally sum up what we found. First, yes, the ability of freely looking around in VR, next to being more realistic, can also be helpful. Second, things that work in separate and in other scenarios do not necessarily work in combination. The best example is pointer-directed leaning. Torso-directed steering works together with a controller and leaning. Together with leaning, it forms up a nice package that feels good. But wait, there was something else. The costs. We wanted to talk about the costs. Are there extra costs? What are they? And how expensive does it get? First, we need an extra tracker. More gear is never good. Second, the system should be wireless to allow unrestricted turning. Last, and often forgot, is additional calibration, more possible connection problems, and so on. So it is, I would say, as cheap as never before, but it still has its price. So what are the limits of our work and what is possible future work? First, are the findings we made transferable also to a standing scenario, and what are the differences? Second, how do the tested methods compare to pointing directed methods, which are somehow like our virtual body or pointer directed method, but with direct manipulation? And last, what about further variables like presence and cybersickness? Because of the amount of conditions, we only had a first look into those. The code and all sources to run the experiment are freely accessible on GitHub, and the full video you can watch on YouTube. If you are further interested in more seated stuff, also visit our workshop page. Now, thank you for your virtual attention.
I'm going to unmute here. That'll help a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Daniel. We do have a bunch of questions here in Slido. To the audience, you guys are rocking it. Thank you very much. And I don't have to ask all the questions. So the first one here, how long did people need to learn the different interfaces? You know, you mentioned that they went through a practice and they could say as long as they want. Did you see any differences between the interfaces? And if so, what were the main issues there?
Yeah, interesting question. I think it's twofold. First, how long did the participants think they need to learn the interfaces, and how long did they really need? Because, as I said, they had unlimited time to test the interfaces. But I think they are always a little bit in pressure in studies like that, even if you don't do any pressure. So they don't took so many time for all the interfaces. Never more than a minute, I would say. When there was one that they trained a little bit or more, then it was a body-directed leaning one, because that's really difficult. And I would say that was also the only one that they significantly got better while they performed with the level. So I don't think it's a good method, but I think when we have done a complete new run after they did that, they even would be so the learning curve was very, very steep there. I think they could even perform better. With all the others, they learned the interfaces relatively fast, especially the leaning ones. I have to admit, a lot of people were already biased from gamepad controllers. They used, I think 80% of our subjects had prior experience with the gamepad, which is always unfortunate. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So the next question, hopefully this will be an easy one. What were your error bars? So what do the error bars represent?
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. I just noticed that after recording the video, it's a 95% confidence interval.
All right, thank you. So maybe this gets to a similar issue as the number of participants who had extensive gamepad experience. So, you know, given that many studies do show gender differences in spatial orientation skills, you know, can you speak to the limitations of the study with only one female?
Yeah. That's definitely an issue we also discussed a little bit longer as a big limitation of the work. Unfortunately, this one female even dropped out. So at the end, there was no data of any female, which is really an issue. And even more diversity problems. I think, as I already mentioned, the gamepad primering. I really want to do a study in future where I hope I have the opportunity to stream the people out and really maybe have run a study on an interface like that, especially against leaning. I did a lot of studies with leaning, and always leaning interfaces are very close to the gamepad ones. And I'm really interested, how does that look when the people don't even know the gamepad interfaces? Because I know how people that never used gamepads use them. It's really difficult. And so it's really biased, not only regarding females, but also regarding experience with devices.
All right, thank you. So next question is, do you think the torso leaning is something that one can use for a long term? And did your participants express their opinions on this? So I think this is getting into fatigue.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. One comment on that. I think for the study we made the precision or you really had to lean a little bit to go forward, because when people never had used interfaces like that, you maybe want to give them some room for the precision. But our observations with these interfaces are, you really, when you're an expert in this, you really need very, very less movement in your upper body to use these interfaces. And you learn that very fast, but we are usually not doing that in study because we are expecting that people don't know the leaning interface. And especially then it's really not tiring. And for the turning, so the torso part, when you use a swivel chair and just use one foot to move or something like that, we all often observe that works very well as well. It's not tiring. And another story, it might be in the standing case, and we think we want to investigate that next, because my assumption would be that this is much more tiring, turning around and stuff like that.
All right, thank you. So we're actually out of time for more questions. Hopefully we'll have a chance to gather in hubs afterwards and maybe chat some more.
Yeah,
but I think
I'm
we're
in the
going to go
Slack
to
channel.
Yeah, or Slack. Yeah, excellent. So we're going to take a short break while we set up the next talk, and then we will be back.